issue or some type of interaction about the fact that he was previously dated another woman. And this is a conversation that takes place minutes before the collision. And so we have statements from the defendant herself that show the discord in the relationship, the anger, being pissed, the motive. Without reading them, because it's unnecessary, there is substantial corroborative evidence. Not only that the text messages, which are corroborated by the niece's testimony, but the imminency of it, that this is happening in real time, moments before John O'Keefe's death. And so all of this should be admissible. It's all supportive of each other.
Your Honor, if I could just correct the record very quickly.
Sure.
If anything Mr. Brennan just said was true, he might have an argument. My goodness. It's important to get some of the facts right. You got to get some of them right. The conversation that he just referenced with Jen McCabe was the next day. It was the next morning, not minutes before the collision. He's read the every time he stands up, he says, "I've read the I wasn't there. I've read the transcripts." We got to hold him to that burden, Your Honor. You got to get the facts right. That conversation with Jen McCabe was the next morning after John O'Keefe had been found, after he didn't come home.
I'm sorry, I just need to correct.
I'm sorry. I was talking to my client real quick. I'm not quite done. This was during the time after 5:07, after the SUV leaves, we see One Meadows, and Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts get together. And as they're looking for them, as they're looking for him and searching for him, that's the point at which they have the conversation about being some other woman, or why he might not have come home, or what her mindset might have been at the time. It's after the fact, well after the fact. The other issues concerning Karen Reed's statements about being upset, or in Gretchen Voss's words, were you pissed at him? It was in context of when. When were you upset with him? When he didn't come back out, when he didn't come back to the car. After she left, she was angry. That's where all the voicemails take place. That's what she was talking about, having been angry. There is no evidence, none whatsoever, no evidence in the record. I want to make this as crystal clear as I can. No controverted evidence, no suspect, no evidence at all that John O'Keefe and Karen Reed had a single crossword that night before he ended up missing and she went home. Before he ended up walking out of the car, going toward the house, and she ended up leaving when he didn't come back out. Zero. The only evidence that was propounded throughout that entire day was hours and hours earlier that morning, dealing with, did you feed the kids donuts? And yeah, I did. You know, I don't like it when you feed the kids donuts. She was spoiling the kids. It was not enough to enrage anybody. It's ridiculous. And the evidence that it didn't enrage anybody is the fact that they ended up later that night together in a lovey-dovey environment, getting along fine, getting along wonderfully. That's why the Commonwealth cannot make their burden to establish that this was the type of information that she would have, by necessity, acted on, and not just acted on in any way, acted on in a way that's consistent with their theory that she would have received the information and murdered him for it. That's the hurdle over which the Commonwealth cannot leap for the admissibility of this type of evidence. It's far, far more prejudicial than it is probative.
Okay.
Before accusing somebody of getting it wrong, the person accusing should be right. I know that Mr. Jackson, Attorney Jackson, was present during the Voss interviews, but apparently they haven't listened to the interviews or read the transcripts. Page 88, line 22. Not the next morning. When Jen was navigating John to the Alberts, she said it's near Ashley's house. Ashley and John had hooked up prior to John and I dating. Similarly, page 92, line 1, totally contrary to what you just heard. Totally. There was a woman who was a mother to kids that were close to John's kids who lived very close to the Alberts. In fact, when Jen was navigating John to the Alberts, when I was driving, she said it near Ashley's house. Ashley and John had hooked up prior to John and I dating. She broke up briefly with her husband. Not my words.
All right. So we're going to break. We've got a lot of ground to still cover. I suggest that we take the personal attacks completely out of this. Hold on. Both sides. I want to get through these motions today. If we don't, I'll bring you back tomorrow. I'll bring you back Monday. Let's get through these motions. Leave all the attacks, all the falsehoods, all of that. Leave it all aside. Let's focus on the motions and get through this. So I'll see everybody at 2 o'clock.
Your Honor, if I could say one more thing. As the court ponders this last issue.
I'm not even thinking about it for the next hour. Let's leave it.
Oh my God. That
Just want to say welcome to Daniel from Drunken Turkeys is here too. If you can see on the screen, welcome. Thank you, Daniel, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. That was wow. That was interesting to watch at the end there.
Yeah, that was. This is a crazy case. But I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kate. You had thoughts on that? I just wanted to welcome Daniel.
No, that was literally just my real time when he's like, Your Honor, one more thing. Like, read the room, dude. Just shut up.
I know. Man. Matt, inject some humor here. That's like that's your specialty. That's one of the best parts of your videos. Put you on the spot.
I don't know. I mean, I just think it's hilarious how they keep saying, oh, they had this lovey-dovey relationship when we've heard those voicemails. And then he's saying, oh, it's because he didn't come back out of the house. But earlier today, Hank Brennan's saying, well, we know that he was connected to the Bluetooth. Bluetooth only connects for 33 feet, and the front door of the house is further than 33 feet. So we know that, it's going to be unequivocal that he never went inside that house in this trial because they have all this extra information now. And like the battery, the temperature of the battery of the phone, I don't know what that's going to play into it, but it sounds like if it was constantly decreasing, then he was outside the whole time, never went inside the house. So
Kate, that was the first real indication that we have about the new data that came from the chip off. He didn't mention the chip off, but he mentioned they sounds like they know from the sensors and from this new data exactly what time John got out of the car, which seems to have been 12:30, which if that's the case, my theory that I put out there for a long time, but gently, because it might sound a little embarrassing, is that it's possible that John gets out of the car. He's got a drink in his hand. He's been drinking for a while, and there were bushes nearby, and he's a guy. He might have urinated in the bushes, and so it's possible that when Karen struck him, she really thought that by then he was in the house and really did back up, not knowing he was there. I don't know. Is that crazy? Anybody want to respond to that?
Crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, that only factors in, like, not physically see, but, like, the car's still gonna, like, you're not gonna just, like, run into something and in your car safety features, you're gonna be like, well, didn't see him in the bushes. Like, that's not how that works.
No, but I'm just saying, so what if he got out at 12:30 and we know he was struck at 12:32 in about 10 seconds? What did he get out and he was maybe just standing there still arguing with her? What was the explanation for the 2-minute difference?
That would have been
they were arguing. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that would have been my thought, is that he was still arguing. I mean, based on the voicemails, it didn't seem like they left on a happy note. So, they were they parked out there for a period of time before she left, or was it a pull up, pull off, go? How long was she parked out there?
Would have been about 8 minutes, 7 or 8 minutes.
So there's a conversation happening in that car outside of that house then during that time. And so if it's an argument based off of what we're hearing after the fact, my assumption is that, that would have been the case. Now, as far as not knowing she hit him, looking at the topography of the area and the location of where the body was at, I feel like she swerved, and that shows intent. I mean, to sideswipe somebody, sure, that kind of pushes somebody out one direction, but into the lawn in that direction. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the black box indicated some sort of like curvature hit, that it hit the curb. That's probably another indication that she swerved into the curve, in towards where he was at. And if the shoe was found there, I wouldn't be surprised if his foot got pinned there and the rest of him, or his shoe got pinned, the rest of him went into the yard.
Kate, did you hear? I want to go back and listen to it again. Maybe, I guess, just I'll have to wait. I don't want to risk doing it now, so I'll wait till after, at the end of the day. But did you hear when Hank was talking about that new data? Did he give any indication that there might be timestamps?
Yes. That they can, or at least they have if not timestamps, then like events that can map out when this happened. And just to go back to the text stream data, not to be nitpicky, but just so it wasn't curb hit necessarily. They said that it was more indicative of a pedestrian strike. Because she went 75% acceleration, 24 miles an hour. At some point, the steering wheel jerks a little bit from left to right. It picks it up on the text stream, and the speed decreases by like half a mile, but the acceleration does not. So it sounds like she just kind of gunned it backwards from what they've said. I could be misunderstanding it too, but.
Yeah, I understand it the same way as Kate. The steering wheel jolted from minus 4.5 to plus 4.5. So you'd get that, for instance, if you struck a curb, right, or any kind of smaller object, you can just imagine it in your hand. It's enough to jolt your hand on top of the steering wheel, so it shifts like that. So yeah, I agree with Kate on that. That's not necessarily evidence that she was. I mean, driving that fast, going backwards, and actually steering would be an incredible. You're looking backwards and you're steering. That would be pretty incredible, but.
The backup cameras make it fairly easy nowadays to back up fairly quickly.
That's true. You could look right at the monitor. Yeah. I still can't get used to that. I still turn around. I have a hard time getting myself to train myself to look at the camera.
And at the time of the accident at 12:30, it wouldn't have been started to snow yet, had it? Or very little about of snow. Is that correct? The blizzard hadn't come in yet?
It hadn't really come in yet. Maybe a dusting.
Okay, so
that's why he has all those safety features. There's there's the nighttime visibility also. Like, and I harp on Kevin with this all the time, just because I think it's an important distinction to make, as I understand it. That third prong of second-degree murder is that you did something, you intended to do something that you did, that a reasonable person would have a likely, outcome of like serious bodily injury or death. So like your boyfriend gets out, whether he's peeing in the bushes or whatever the case may be, when he's behind your car and you gun it 75% down to the floor, up to 24 miles an hour, like a reasonable person should know that you're probably gonna, potentially hurt or kill someone doing that.
Right. And just to clear up, I don't disagree with Kate on this. Where I disagree is a matter of practical application. I think that, yes, the reckless endangerment, so-called reckless endangerment clause, the third prong. So if you take some kind of an action that you knew or should have known could lead to some kind of grievous bodily harm to somebody else, then that's enough to cover you under second degree. I just, as a matter of practicality, will a jury want to throw someone with second degree murder on that and send them away for 20 years? You're going to get 12 jurors to agree on that. And then I did, just to add to that, and she didn't get into specifics with me, but I talked to a couple months ago to a retired judge, and she had problems with it too. She said the case law makes it a little bit harder to actually show that. But I don't know that we're not, she said that, but what I should have brought up with it, and I didn't think about till later, is if that's the case, why wasn't that included in the jury instructions? I mean, the jury instructions had that option to convict her of second degree. So I think she might be wrong on the case law aspect of it. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts. Matt, you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think like these interviews, I don't know what's on the Gretchen Voss tapes, but it sounds like Karen Reed ran her mouth, and he has full, just like she did in this documentary, but this documentary is very edited. But it sounds like he has like lots of footage or recordings of Karen Reed, talking about this case in a way that does not align with the narrative that we have now. Because in the beginning, she was going to just say she did a 3-point turn and left, didn't know what happened. But she had to change it, that she was sitting out there after she found that 8 people saw her car, that his phone data showed him out there. I think it was primarily because the witnesses saw her sitting out there. She thought she could get away with just saying like she just dropped him off and left. And then it's probably her connecting to the Wi-Fi. You know, like all these things like came after the fact. The Gretchen Voss interview was like much earlier, before we like got a lot of this information, way back before, when like her cult was saying like, oh, there's a substance in his shirt, it's going to be dog DNA, and it turned out to be goddamn taillight fragments. So you know, I don't know. I still wonder about like why she's saying she picked the glass out of his face, because she must have had DNA on the glass. Like, did she touch the, like, I have no idea what the hell she's thinking about that, but I don't know.
So I had a theory on that last night that I offered on the channel. So I've had 2 theories on it. The first one that I talked about with Kate on the phone a couple of days ago is that, was she going to try to imply that the wound was fresh because it was still bleeding there, and therefore it couldn't be Karen? And then later on Court TV, Nurse Kim, who is presumably briefed by Karen's attorneys, did go with a similar explanation. But then the other explanation that I realized yesterday is that it is very similar to the Voss situation, where Karen tells the story about picking out a piece of taillight plastic and dropping it in the driveway. And the reason she told that story is she wanted to suggest that the Mass State Police were sloppy or corrupt because they didn't find that piece of taillight within John's driveway. So did she try she always repeats her tricks. So did she try a similar trick here, where she's saying, hey, I plucked a piece of glass with blood on it out of John's face. Where is that cocktail glass? Why didn't the state find that? Just a theory. That's what she was up to. I don't know. Any thoughts on that, Daniel?
Where's the cut on the autopsy? I thought the cut on his face was on the eyelid.
There
were two superficial cuts, I think, on the face. I'm not sure if one was on
the
the
nose. There was
was
like
one
a
on the nose?
superficial cut on the nose. Yeah.
Okay. When did she record this?
The interview with Gretchen Voss, that was in July of 2023.
So the one here recently that she says she plucked the glass out of the nose. When was that?
So that was probably recorded in April of last year.
So before the trial?
Before the trial.
So they weren't anticipating this to being aired until after trial, right?
That's the right way of thinking about it. What was she thinking, then that she might not be thinking now? That's the right approach. Yep.
Right. Did they utilize that in the last trial? Because I would have assumed that if that was recorded before trial, that these are some of the things that they plan on saying at trial to indicate one way or another that John O'Keefe, that she wasn't responsible for John O'Keefe's death. As you guys mentioned, it bleeding at the spot, that could be an indication that he had passed shortly before then, not when she left. Was that brought up in trial? I didn't watch the first trial. I'll be honest.
Yeah. No.
And I feel like there's something that the Commonwealth missed. I think that she did it to cover something that she thought was going to come up, and it didn't. So I don't know what it was, but I think she was trying to get ahead of something, and I don't know what.
Yeah, she definitely was.
I think that was going to be an argument, but something made them choose not to, whether it was a finding in the autopsy or something of that nature. Because had that been something being said, well, the other thing else is the only person that could have said that was her, right? And she didn't testify, correct?
Right. Yeah, so right, she didn't. And Jen and Kerry are adamant that they did not see anything like that, is my understanding. But they might not have. Right. So, and I also, is it possible that Karen has a false memory? So we know her hands were filled with John's blood from when they did CPR. So maybe she really did pluck that piece of glass, and then the blood that ended up getting on John's face was from her hands. So, but again, the most important thing is, like we've been saying, is what was she didn't just say it because, I'm just happen to remember this. Everything she says is purposeful, and that purpose may have changed since the trial, but, what was her purpose back then?
She's an idiot. No, I mean, again, like the level of bleeding, whether it gushed blood, trickled blood, or didn't bleed at all, does not negate the fact that this woman, who swears up and down that this guy was bit by a dog and beaten up by a teenager, somehow had glass in his face. In his face.
It contradicts the fight argument. I mean, it completely contradicts that, because that was like the wound that you would say, like, oh, he had a broken nose because someone punched him, right?
Right.
so the glass in the face contradicts the fight argument completely. So I don't know what the hell. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. Maybe they didn't think they were gonna try to say that. I mean, they didn't really say it at the trial. They said it in like through Turtle Boy before the trial.
You don't get like glass or something like that, like in you, like in, you know, like literally in your skin without an impact event. I mean,
Right.
it's just like, it's ridiculous. I mean, so I don't, the same thing with like, why did she cop up to Bella's mom? Well, I mean, I kind of understand on some level, optics wise, why she copped up to how much she had to drink. Approximately, I do believe she downplayed it. I believe it could actually be more than the Commonwealth is even counting, honestly, but who knows? But you know, she admitted things that there was. Why'd she admit that she was communicating with Turtle Boy through an intermediary? You don't have to lie about it. You can just not say anything at all is an option. But she's like incapable of doing it. I'm sorry. I will say this until this case is over. I know she has a reputation as being an intelligent woman. I don't see it.
I don't either. She's as dumb as they come.
So did we did I get a false impression that perhaps the 2020 evidence is now going to be in discovery, Kate? I mean, the way Brennan referenced it, yeah, I know he's referenced the documentary, which won't be in discovery, but the way he referenced that evidence gave me the sense that maybe they have succeeded in getting that into discovery now. Any chance of that?
I could look on the docket. It would, you know, it would show that it had come in. So hold on, I'll check.
Right. Yeah, it would be something new, but I was surprised to hear him talk about it in that way. Be great if it is, you know. So on the updated witness list, let's see, let me find this. There were some additions to it. And thank you for somebody let me know the Celtics did actually get sold. Let's see where I had this evidence. I think it was from Jen. I got too many emails in here to find it. Updated prosecutor wish list. All right, here we go. So you got the Alberts, of course. Let's see. The Camerano. Let's see. Nothing new here. Turtle Boy. So they have John's mother on this list, too. This is the updated prosecution list. That's interesting, right?
Well, she probably saw that documentary and she's like, now I want to talk about this. Like what I said that morning.
Right.
After Karen mocked her. And maybe they can get that evidence in with her on the stand because it's impeachment. Well, I don't know. I don't know if they can get it in, but.
What do you think, Kate?
I think that the family, I'm pretty sure that in Massachusetts, family members are pretty much entitled to testify if they want to. Don't quote me on that because maybe that's just the impact statements, but I feel like at least an effort is made, right? To, you know, so I'm sure if she didn't want to last time, maybe it was the documentary would want me to speak up for myself because it is my understanding that Karen's recitation of that morning is entirely inaccurate, like from people that were there. So I don't know. And of course her stories changed too. That actually, like, because at first it was just a vibe, right? At first it was like, ooh, I went in there and I felt funny and I felt like everyone was looking at me and I thought, oh my God, did they see the taillight? And now we've switched to like her directly confronting Karen. And again, like if you didn't hit him with a car, why would you take that as confrontation at all? I'd be like, oh, you think he looks like a car? You got hit by a car? Like, oh, we should probably find out which one it is. Not like, oh my God, that's an accusation and I need to leave. Like that's what a guilty person does.
Right.
100%. I mean, the fact that she's bringing up her taillight to all these people, like, I just can't believe she's admitting to that. She's like, I told Jen and Carrie about the taillight, but then that video is deleted. Like, why is so much attention being talked about that? Like in her old interview about Peggy O'Keefe, she said, oh, I knew my taillight was broken and they were all looking at it. Like, why would you even be registering that if you didn't hit him with the car, right? Like, you wouldn't even give a shit about your goddamn taillight.
And of course, the big new addition to the prosecution's witness list is Natalie. Natalie had gone to college with Karen, didn't really know her very well in college, but, you know, knew her a little bit. And then when she saw what happened as far as Karen being charged here, Natalie reached out just to be supportive, and Karen reached out back, and they became friendly, and then they became very friendly pretty quickly. Natalie was a big part of Karen's support. But most importantly, in April of 2023, it was Natalie that becomes the go-between between Karen and Turtle Boy. And it was like that for several weeks, maybe a month. And then once Karen realized, why not just cut out the middleman and just communicate directly via the encryption app Signal with Turtle Boy, and obviously over their phone calls, she discarded Natalie like a piece of old laundry. A very foolish mistake. But so now Natalie, I'm sure she won't happy about this because she's out in California. She has a lot going on in her life and stuff like that. But now she may be compelled to come here and testify.
I know that, no, not happy about it. The possibility. First of all, this is not a guarantee. And I think like it's a little bit premature to have it, because like, as I understand it, Brendan has agreed that this consciousness of guilt is not going to be his case in chief. So I think that's kind of contingent on how things go with the rules, all that stuff.
Right.
And so obviously, like, Natalie, I know, like, she doesn't want to be in, like, on TV or have everybody looking at her. She definitely doesn't want the harassment that unfortunately is probably going to start any minute now, just from her name being out there again, because how these people are. But I know that, like, she's going to do what's right.
Right.
She doesn't have anything to hide. She's not shirking from anything. So, like, I don't know. I think, like, hopefully, Turtle doesn't start it on her again, because he was doing some pretty vile stuff, including looking up, sex on her phone and then reading out whatever messages, private messages. His lawyer that was so worried about the privacy and protection of witnesses today, right? Can't get Turtle Boy's phone, right? Well, he was doing stuff like that with her phone extraction. So it's unfortunate that now she's been thrown on this list. You would think that it would offer her an additional layer of protection, but quite frankly, she's had this status the whole time, just less publicly, and it's done nothing. So I mean, the whole process is just very depressing for me, and obviously I think why I feel a certain way about that whole part of it, right? I mean, it is what it is.
KP asked what I think about Natalie, and I said, I've got to know Natalie since this. She's a good person. She's a smart person. She's a very loyal person, and that's where she was following her loyalty in terms of her relationship to Karen as this was going down. We don't know. Well, we can't say. We don't want to say exactly what information she was in the middle of, because the way it was working was she was being used through the Encryption Act Signal as a go-between between Turtle Boy and Karen. And the way those messages work is they automatically self-delete after a certain amount of time, usually 30 minutes, depending on what your setting is. So if you're a middle person, in order to relay that message, you're not trying to document this, but just so you don't lose that, you're going to make a lot of screenshots just so you can accurately relay that information. So presumably Natalie would have had a lot of those screenshots on her phone, and probably Turtle Boy too when you get to his phone. So I think that's what the issue here is. But like Kate said, they might be able to avoid calling her if they don't have. So I think possibly what Natalie might have done is sent to Turtle Boy from Karen addresses of the witnesses or anything similar that might be relevant towards targeting those witnesses for intimidation.
No. That was not Natalie.
Okay.
There is a direct screenshot from Signal that it was what was used to blackmail Karen. It was sent around.
Okay.
So that, but I mean, Natalie, I think, is a prime example of why Karen Reed is so insidious. She's a businesswoman. She's extremely intelligent, educated, very caring, and of course, very loyal. But she is, what's the word I'm looking for? You have to be a certain level of jaded to expect someone like Karen Reed, right? Like, she's built a nice life for herself. Her parents did before her. Like, she's gotten to view a lot of the highest points of society. So I feel like that's a demographic that Karen takes advantage of. I feel like that's where she gets most of the money from. Are these people that otherwise, they're certainly in better shape than I am, right? But they just lack that sort of savvy
Street-
to, and then of course just go
streetwise.
straight up. Yeah.
Street,
Well, beyond
Nat-
streetwise though. Yeah.
Natalie's
I mean,
not
there's just-
streetwise. I'm just, Natalie. Yeah, Natalie is not someone that's involved with shady things, so she doesn't really understand that way of thinking. Is that fair? Or
I wouldn't even say shady. I mean, it's just a certain level of pessimism, I guess, that comes with exposing yourselves to maybe the worst parts of the world that other people don't get. But it's just I don't think that Natalie has anything to worry about if she is compelled to testify. She was very forthcoming with investigators. She's unfortunately already had her entire interview blasted on the internet, along with details about grand jury minutes and everything else that Turtle Boy decides to do. But she is unassailable because at this point, Alan Jackson's genius client has admitted that they used her as a third, as an intermediary, and that she then inexplicably admitted she got nervous about what. So they went to an encrypted app, and Turtle Boys admitted and verified not only that her role existed, but the screenshots of these conversations that have come out. They validated it already. So, there's nothing they can do to her on the stand. Nothing.
I got one question before I go to lunch, unless there's something else that you guys want to bring up. And this will be a question that I will just direct first at Daniel and then at Matt. And the reason I say Daniel first is because he was former law enforcement. So Joe Krowski mentioned in the documentary that this investigation into Karen Reed's, into the murder of John O'Keefe was very sloppy. I think maybe Joe might have evolved a little bit because that was recorded back probably in April. So I'm not sure about that. We'll have to ask Joe. But do you guys think that this investigation was really sloppy in any kind of unusual way? Daniel first, and then Matt.
From everything that I have seen, I say that you have two parts of this, right? You have the investigation, and then you have what Proctor said and did on the side. And I think that part of what he said and did is really, really dragging down the actual investigation that he did. And I know he just got terminated, and that doesn't look good for anything. But at the end of the day, what it says is that the state and local law enforcement are willing to do what's right. If they see something, regardless of it being just a situation where an officer has degraded the image of the law of the department, they were willing to take those methods and steps to remove him as a police officer, meaning they wouldn't be biased towards other persons who are officers, i.e. the Alberts, etc. And so that's the first part. The second part, as far as the investigation goes, I think that there's a confusion between what a proper investigation during the perfect elements and situation and conditions versus what they had in that scenario. There was a whole weather condition aspect to it that really played a huge role, that when you look at some of the defense experts, they're coming in talking about grass being softer or dog bites or all these other things. Take the dog bite, one of them, but the hitting snow, hitting grass, all this stuff. And I think the doctor's expertise was in Southern California and then in another Southern country. And so not saying that he doesn't know or isn't well versed in colder conditions, but it didn't even seem like they played a role in their findings as far as could these injuries have been done based off of the cold ground. Well, anyways, right. I'm kind of rambling there. Overall, I thought that in the first trial, even though I didn't watch any of it, I've seen much of it. Let me rephrase that. I've watched probably about 10% of it. I've seen a lot of documentaries. I've seen a lot of, or I've seen the one that was recent. I've seen a lot of highlights here and there. It just kind of appears that the prosecution did a sloppy job of presenting their case more so than the investigation being sloppy. I like how in this prosecution's case, it's they're covering, they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's. They're bringing in the right experts they should have brought in, and not just relying on the fact that there was no dog DNA per se, or just relying on ARCA. They brought in their own expert. And so I think that this is going to be a completely different case. And I think people are going to think maybe it wasn't so sloppy after all once we see the trial.
Yeah. Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree. I think a lot of the pretrial stuff before the first trial made you think that they're sloppy, but then once
Yeah.
like it was explained in the trial, a lot of those
Yeah.
like things were kind of explained, and that was like understandable. Like the solo cups, it's like, do you just let the evidence get washed away in the blizzard,
Yeah.
or do you
Yep.
scoop
Yep.
it up and get it out of there? I mean, that's not. And it's like the defense just did not have a coherent story. Like, are they sloppy or are they framing her? It's like it just wasn't
Good point.
coherent.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
the solo cups being in the garage, if they were framing her, they had the blood in those cups. All they had to do was toss it on the back of the car if they really were framing her. But no, they had touch DNA, which is not something you can really plant easily. The blood, easy, throw it on the car. And that didn't
Great
happen.
point.
So like, I just think that, yeah, Proctor's text makes things look bad. It's like bad optics. It makes the department look bad. But I don't think overall, I think that she just has a skilled defense team that's trying to poke holes everywhere they can find them. But it's just not coherent. Like there's just no real story when you try to put all the pieces together. And like her cult is still screaming about all these different things, but they don't even have a narrative anymore. Like what happened? Like her tail is broken in that spot all over him. Like what happened? Like they don't have an answer.
Yeah, that was great because I agree with both of you guys. I agree with Daniel that it seems more now that the prosecution the first time around was the real issue more so than the investigation. And Matt makes a great point too, that so many of these things that looked really suspicious really were cleared up during the trial, and mostly they only look suspicious because we in the public are ignorant about how a lot of things work, and we need that explanation. But the prosecution isn't going to go out there and have a press conference and do a documentary where they can explain it. So we learned why that the Lexus was towed to the Sally port, and even my own investigation looked into it, realized it was actually more. The explanation they gave in the trial was that it was a heated facility, unlike most state police garages, which makes sense. You have to get this ice and snow to melt before the cards team can examine it. But in addition, the Sally port is only a mile away from the prosecution. The Norfolk County DA's office is a mile away. So it's the closest facility. So you want your evidence near your prosecutors. That was another thing that they've allowed to let stand in the documentary last night. Alan Jackson was allowed to say that the evidence didn't end up in the state police documented until 6 weeks later, which was bullshit. What happened was the evidence goes to the evidence room at the DA's office, which makes total sense. Then eventually, when it was sent off for specialized testing at state police facilities, then it gets entered into the state police system. So for instance, John's clothing initially ends up in the evidence room at the DA's office. Then 6 weeks later, it's sent to a lab for testing, and that's when it gets into the system. So it's over and over. So many of those things were explained. So I'm really glad Matt brought that up. I don't know. You guys want? I want to have lunch. I'm starved. I can leave you guys talking if you like.
I got to hop off, but I'll pop back on later.
Thank
I'm
you,
gonna
Matt.
do the same.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Let's have lunch, and we'll all be back at 2. Thanks, Kate.